Hey, Bomb Squad. If you're a comedian or a podcaster looking for an affordable website solution with a modern look, then we recommend Puck's Hub. With a Puck's Hub website, you can set up your new website in minutes with easy-to-use pre-built templates. Puck's Hub websites are customizable and can easily be integrated with other platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. The best part? Puck's Hub plans are only $5 per month. We use Puck's Hub for our website at the Art of Bombing podcast, and we think you should too. That's why we've partnered with Puck's Hub to offer listeners a free 60-day trial. Head over to puckshub.com to subscribe and use promo code AOBPOD at checkout for your 60-day free trial, and then pay only $5 per month after that. Take your career to the next level with your own Puck's Hub website today.
Dan Bublitz Comedy Productions.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, 'cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Between Bombs Presents Callbacks, where Josh and I call back the most recent episode. This week, we are calling back episode 281 with Amanda Kuster. And let me tell you, that was a fun episode. That was a fun weekend, because that was the weekend of Jokecella 7 at the Comedy Fort. So not only did she come record the podcast, I got to hang out with Amanda at that night. We were supposed to be on a show together, but I got bumped from the show.
Right. Of course.
Of course I got bumped. I got bumped to the early show is what happened. So
Oh, all right. Yeah.
But I was still there hanging out. So it was fun. That was a fun little weekend.
She seems like a good hang.
Oh, I think so. She's a lot of fun. A lot of good energy, positive energy.
That's right. Thought it was a solid episode. Lots of good things that you guys got into. Anything you want to talk about before we hit the topics?
No, I mean, yeah, like I said, she was fun. Fun hang, very positive. And I think, actually, this is what we got to do. Before we talk about the topics, there's one thing we forgot to do. We got to stop. So if anybody's listening and they haven't went back to listen to the episode, we got to give you that opportunity to go back and listen, because then the contents of what we're going to be talking about, it'll make more sense. So
that's right. You should freshen up, guys.
Yep.
We'll turn around while you do that.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Yeah. Now that you listen to it, now I'm ready for the topics, Josh.
All right. So a couple of things I thought were pretty significant on this one in particular. Like, I'll start with the one that resonated with me the most. Yeah, Amanda talks about putting her goals out in the universe, right? What that specifically means, the significance of doing that. So what I mean specifically is not necessarily just saying I have a goal and this is what it is and it's to myself, but actually putting it out there in the world, telling somebody, and in her case, mentioning it on a podcast, writing it down, right? What do you think about that?
I think that's a great thing to do. And, in the episode, in the intro, you and I, we talked about, we did a plug for a friend's new book called The Gig Diary. And the first couple of pages of the Gig Diary are for that, for putting your goals out there, writing them down. And, there's even a section to where you can prioritize these goals, what kind of priority they are. So I think, me personally, I think it is important to write your goals down. I've talked about it on here before because I'm behind and I'm looking at it right now and I haven't done anything, but I have a whiteboard that has my 2023 goals written on it right above where I mostly work, my desk. So I'm always looking at it every day. Now, some of the goals that I have on there, sure, I haven't accomplished yet, but I know they're going to get accomplished
Yeah.
because of things that I've already booked or whatever. But I think, yeah, writing them down. And are you familiar, because you work in a professional marketing sales environment, so you're probably familiar with this. This is something I learned in school. And, I just started a new marketing job, and something I have to think about is that, they're very goal oriented and they want me to
Yeah.
set some goals, and they use SMART goals. Are you familiar with SMART goals?
Yeah. Like there's an acronym that spells
It's
out SMART.
Yep, yep. And it's basically basically a format of setting a goal and writing out a goal and making it yourself accountable so that you can achieve those goals. Because I think with that, yeah, it's important to put your goals out there, tell a friend, write it down, tell a stranger, like you said, Amanda put it on the podcast, that kind of thing. Those are all important things to do, but you also need to make sure you're taking the steps to achieve them, because you
That's right.
can, if you're not, if you write a goal down or put a goal out there but you're not doing anything to achieve it, then there's no point in writing it down if you're not going to do the work. So you got to have,
Yeah.
you got to
We got
make steps.
That's right. We have a couple of different things. It's funny. I have like a half day training tomorrow, and I incorporate a lot of my stand up into the trainings that I do. And so, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you haven't heard me,
What he does
nearly.
is he just makes him watch his videos on YouTube.
Yeah, guys. So anyway, I'm gonna go catch a cup of coffee. I just want you to watch my set on YouTube, and I'll be back. I'll be back
Make
later.
sure you
And
smash the subscribe button when you're done.
yeah, yeah. Make sure that you do that. Also, I got a podcast. Be sure and check that out while you're there. But in that training, like the way we wrap it up is we actually talk about goals. So we talk specifically about them, and I actually have them write them down. And Dan, you mentioned the SMART goals, and just for everybody's sake, in case they are listening and are on a run or driving somewhere, a SMART goal is defined as, and here are the pieces of SMART: specific,
This is the acronym.
all spelled out for you. So the S is specific. So make sure that the goal is not too wide ranging, because it can't be achieved if it's just too nebulous.
Mm-hmm.
Measurable. So is there an actual way that you can measure, or not only measure the outcome, but measure the progress towards it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
An example of that would be setting a goal as, I want to hit X amount of open mics in a month, a week,
yeah,
or year, or whatever it is, because it's specific and it's very measurable, because all you have to do is keep track of how many mics you're going to.
that's right. And if it's measurable, it can be the A, attainable. Reason that kind of gets plugged into this is that it's easier to manage something if you're managing it on a daily cadence. So Dan just gave a great example of, okay, I might have a goal to get better at comedy, right? Which starts way too nebulous. So I got to break that goal down into more specific pieces. And one of those is a number of open mics, which then forces the positive behaviors of writing and preparing and getting on stage and getting more comfortable and practicing what hand you hold the mic in, and trying some new things, right? So all of that kind of rolls down to, all right, in a year I want to hit this number of mics. But if I just put the number of mics I want to go to in a year up on a big board, sometimes it can be really hard to chunk that out. So to make it attainable, make it measurable, but down to a level that's actually manageable, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I go to 3 open mics a week is my goal, but I only hit 2 this week, it's a lot more manageable at a daily or a weekly level to go, you know what, I got to get 4 in next week to get back on track. That's easier to deal with
Yep.
than, oh crap, it's June and I've gone to 2 open mics so far.
Or it's July and I haven't even checked one goal off my list.
Yeah, right. I mean, let's just say, right, like hypothetically speaking, that'd be bad if that happened to someone. And then realistic is another component of that, right? So if you have kids like I do, and you're paying a mortgage and you got to put some food on the table for a family and all that kind of stuff, you might not want to put that you're going to go to 7 open mics a week down on your calendar, or that you're going to make $35,000 a year on comedy, right? Like, unless you kind of have already been starting out and you've already kind of achieved that, that's one thing. But you got to make it realistic. And finally, time bound. So by when am I going to achieve these goals? That's the smart goal.
Yeah.
formula.
And I think I honestly, I mean, there's different goal tracking, and there's probably different other acronyms for, setting goals, and different programs that, life coaches or whatever have put out there. But I really do like the SMART goals because of that, how specific it is, the acronym's great, and it's covering all the bases, because I feel like a lot of the reasons people will not accomplish goals is because they set unrealistic goals or unrealistic time expectations, or they don't have a time, like they don't set a specific time to achieve the goal, or they don't take the little steps to make the goal, like, and on my example, the example is, certain amount of mics per whatever. It might be a situation where they set X amount of mics for the year, but then they don't go to any open mics each week. So, it makes it so that you can't reach that goal. And then when you
Right.
don't reach your goals, it becomes counter interactive with you, in the sense that, and that doesn't make sense. I know that what I just said, counter interactive, that is
Well,
not a thing.
but right,
Counterintuitive, I think, is what I meant to say.
but it makes it so you don't hit your goal, and so that you don't set goals because you don't hit your goals, and then you're in this downward spiral. That's what I took from what you're.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at, is if you're setting goals and not achieving them, you get very discouraged, less
Yeah.
likely to set other goals, less likely to put as much effort into what you're doing. And that's why it's important not only to set big goals and long-term goals, but to have short-term goals. And, I just met with a client. I've been, doing consulting, and I just met with a client, and we were talking about their goals, and they had a lot of long-term goals. And one of the action items I gave them was to set some short-term goals, and to make sure that those short-term goals align with the long-term goals, in the sense of, if your long-term goal is to headline 2 clubs a month, well, what are your short-term goals to get to that point? It should
Right.
be, building, if you're wanting to be like an MC, then your short-term goal should be getting, 10 to 15 minutes, getting a good tape to submit, getting, your stage time, writing, 15 minutes a day, or whatever it is. And then making sure you're hitting those small goals that'll ultimately get you to your big goals.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. This is a good topic, like I think the perfect storm of Wendy's book, that we brought up in the last show, as well as the interview with Amanda itself, kind of combined into this really good topic for people. It's something that we'll probably visit again, but
Oh,
so
absolutely.
to sum up, like, make sure your goals are out there and that you have some accountability to the goal. It's easy to sort of use, the confines of your own mind as a nice alibi for not getting something done, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I put it out there into the world, then it becomes real. And it takes a little planning of the goal. Like we just talked about some different ways that you can make the goal actually achievable.
Absolutely. And I would say this, when you make goals, short-term goals or smaller goals that are achievable, I talked about what happens when you don't achieve your goals and you get discouraged. Well, when you set small goals and you start achieving those goals, that has the same effect, but in the opposite way, where now not only are you're getting encouraged to do to achieve goals, and you're getting the passion, and it helps fuel you, so you want to keep going and achieve these other goals.
Yep, exactly. Another thing that came up, I thought this was more of a tactical distinction, but you guys talked a little bit about how bombs fall into these two broader buckets, and I hadn't really thought about that before until I was reviewing this episode. But like, there's a bomb, and then there's a bomb by circumstances, right? Like a technical bomb, right? unpack that more for us. Like, what are
Well,
you?
so there's a bomb. The bomb, a regular bomb in comedy is when you're up there telling your jokes and the audience is not responding, and it's probably because your jokes in that moment aren't good. Whether it's because they're new jokes and you haven't fully formed them or polished them, or maybe it's the way you're delivering them, or it's on you. That's a regular bomb. A regular bomb is your fault. You can blame the audience all you want, but it's your fault. Something you're doing isn't clicking to get that audience to laugh at those jokes, whatever it might be. Now, a circumstantial bomb, that's when something happens that's out of your control. And
Mhm.
like, for instance, the mic cutting in and out. Sometimes
Yeah,
there's a bad mic cable, and then you'll be up there and you're trying to not, move the mic. But then when you do your punchline, it cuts out. And then
yeah,
you start bombing in that sense. That's out of your control. You can't do anything about. All you can try to not move as much and hope the mic cable doesn't cut in and out, or whatever it might be. Another situation, anything technical that gets in the way of the performance, or environmental. Sometimes things happen where you go to tell a joke and suddenly server drops a tray and the audience didn't hear your punchline. Of
right.
course that joke's going to bomb. Or there's a heckler that won't shut up and every comic's trying to get them to be quiet and they're ruining the show, and then because the venue wants their money they won't remove them like they should. And so then there's so there's those are what I when I say circumstantial, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like
Yeah,
it's circumstance and it's environmental things that are beyond your control.
yeah. I feel like the circumstances could really become even more strategic, right? Like, you can be set up to fail at a performance because no one told the audience that there was going to be a show, and the audience that is there was totally there to watch the game or
Yep.
to enjoy a private surprise birthday party for somebody that's just wrapping up. And now
Yep.
you're up on stage with a microphone and you want them to listen to you. Now, that's that environment. Like, there are some things you can do to make the best of it for sure. And your skill level as a comedian is going to come out at those times. But sometimes there's nothing anybody can do in that situation
Yeah,
to not make it
absolutely.
a bomb.
Yeah, there's just and when you bomb like that, you just have to chalk it up to that. I mean, it's you can't let that linger and destroy you know your mental health, if you will, because you couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah,
You just have to do your time.
exactly. Have you ever had a circumstantial bomb that you didn't realize until you reviewed the recording?
Honestly, the bomb that inspired this podcast in the long run was circumstantial. I
Hmm.
I mean, I think if I would have been further along and more experienced, I could have done better, but I don't
Yeah,
think I could have. I don't think there would have been a way to make that a good show in the sense of where I would have just killed.
right.
I don't think any comedian in that situation, would have been able to kill in that, because there was just too many things that led up to an awkward start.
Yeah,
And for
yeah,
people listening, if you're, just real quick, the bomb of mine that inspired this was a corporate gig, and right before I went up, they had a big ceremony for. There was a big, basically a memorial for somebody who had passed away a few weeks prior from cancer, and he won a big
right.
award, and there was standing ovations and sad and happy and all these little things that went into it, and no proper intro into the comedy.
Right.
Because that's another thing that can lead to it being circumstantial is that setup. Like you were saying, if the audience doesn't know there's comedy, they're not good, and if they're not there for comedy, they're not going to be into the show, and it's going to feel like a bomb. But the same thing can go for, when the audience might, they do know it's a comedy show, but you get a really weird intro, it
Oh man,
sets you up right away to where you're already digging out of a hole
totally.
because the tension in the room is awkward.
That's right. And you got to basically start from scratch. I mean, I had that happen to me several
Mhm.
times. One in particular is just I don't know if the guy was high or maybe he just was kind of, like not used to having to do that. Like he was now Josh Shirley, right? Like I'm like, what, dude? Like, and I'm doing what exactly? Like, do people even know that there's a comedy show right now? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had situations as well, and I asked you that last question because Amanda brings up a pretty good example of this. Like I was at an open mic one night, and my set just goes terribly, right? Like people just aren't reacting to it, and it was one of those sets where I had kind of been on the circuit with it for a while, and I kind of was expecting a lot more from it, particularly because this mic that night actually had a crowd. And I was like, okay, it's the perfect storm. I'm going first. There's a crowd. They're fresh. They're listening, and I'm gonna, I've got these jokes that are not actually brand new. They're still new and need work, and it just falls flat. And I spend the rest of the night just pissed, kind of mad at myself. What happened? And I'm looking inward at like, okay, I'm replaying it in my mind. Was it this line or that line? I forgot this part. And because I know it's not going well, I'm like sort of not maintaining composure very well. So there's that's affecting the actual performance of the set. Get home. A couple nights later, after the emotions have kind of worn off, I listen to it, and I actually hear at the very end of my set the MC come up. Josh Shirley, everybody. All right, give it up for him. I'm going to turn the mic up because we can't hear shit back there. So
they didn't do a proper sound check.
Exactly. And when he says back there, he's talking about most of the audience. This particular venue
exactly.
is like pie shaped, and you're kind of at the tip of the pie. And then, and it goes back in a wedge formation. So maybe two tables could actually hear what was coming out of my mouth.
Yeah. So once you knew that, once you listen back, were you able to just be like, oh, yeah, not my fault, and let it go?
Exactly. I was able to kind of categorize it. Now that you've given me this new filing system, I'm able to like categorize it into that's a circumstantial bomb. And now the laughs I did get and the energy I did create actually kind of seemed more amplified, and it put it into perspective for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important because it's easy to get lost in, you have a bad set, or when you feel like a bomb, and then you get all upset at yourself, and it's easy to get lost in that negativity and not necessarily not taking accountability. You still want to take accountability for a bad set, especially if it was your fault, in a situation, but there are circumstances that are just going to be out of your control. Nothing you can do. And being able to at least get them out of the way, because then you can focus on the bombs that were real bombs and try to pick those apart and learn from those, because you're not going to learn a lot from a circumstantial bomb outside of, oh, it was a circumstance, that nothing I could have done would have made this better. But on a bomb where you just, it's on you, you can listen back and be like, oh, I missed a word, or I missed a line, or I didn't deliver that how I normally deliver it. My rhythm was off, or, I fumbled a word, or whatever it might be that led to that joke not working, or I was in a bad mood that night. And now that I listen back, I can feel that, I hear that in my delivery that, oh, I was definitely off, and I knew I was off before I went on stage, and that just fed into my, my performance, things like that. So you can actually learn from it. So you definitely do have to look at that and categorize the bombing, so that way, you can focus on the ones that are going to help you get better.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I think this has been a good discussion.
Oh, absolutely. I think, and again, we're just touched real quick on this. Make sure you are going back and listening to those bombs, because those are the ones where you get the most out of, so make sure you're listening to them. And now, after this episode, you can categorize them.
That's right. File your bombs for us. Give us some,
file
maybe in the Facebook page.
Yeah,
guys can
that
give
would be
us.
great. That's a great idea. This is the action item this week. If you're listening to the podcast, and I know we give action items all the time, nobody follows through. It's so good. We're still putting them out there. Maybe one will hit. It's like throwing shit at the wall. Eventually, something will stick, right?
That's right. That's right.
But the action item will be to this week go to the Facebook group and we'll start the thread. I'll start the thread. All you guys have to do is comment. We're going to do a thread on stories of circumstantial bombs. We want to hear your stories of circumstantial bombing. So the thread will be out when this comes out. You guys listen to this episode, go into the Facebook page and tell us your circumstantial bombing stories. That's the action item. All right.
You heard it, folks.
You heard it. All right. We'll be back next week. Brand new episode with my good friend Nathan Holtz making his 4th appearance on the Art of Bombing. He's very excited about having the record of being the most being on the podcast the most.
Good for him.
So yeah, we'll be back next week. Nathan Holtz. Thank you for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. And until next week, have a great weekend.
This has been a Dan Bublitz comedy production. Raw.